Okay, everyone, it is 3:01, and welcome to our work session. We have two items on the agenda today. The first is to continue our work in our strategic plan, and with us we have Dr. Lloyd Gardner, our Chief of Staff, and two folks from RTI, Mike Martin and Frederica Nash. Thank you again for being here with us. This was supposed to be a part of our retreat, but Mother Nature had some other ideas. So thank you for being here with us.
Chair Mahaffey, members of the board, and Superintendent Moore, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you here this afternoon. And as Chair Mahaffey has already said, we're actually taking what was planned at the retreat and breaking it into smaller work sessions to accommodate your work session schedule. And we're delighted to be here this afternoon to work through very fundamental elements of the strategic plan, primarily the mission, vision, and core beliefs, as well as to get from you some input about how you would like to proceed and engage in the community. What do we want to learn from the community as we go forth? So this afternoon is going to be structured with information presented by Michael and Frederica. They're going to set the stage. They're also going to take you back to your last session you had where you answered some questions around aspirations and hopes for our students in a post-COVID world. And that foundational information is going to be the springboard for your work this afternoon. And you're actually going to have the opportunity to participate in some small groups and then come back together as a group to share what you discussed in those smaller focus sessions. So it's a pleasure to turn it over to Michael and Frederica at this time. Again, thank you for letting us be here. We look forward to our work this afternoon.
All right. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to frame what we're going to do today, and I think what we hope to do is build off the conversation that we had at the last board meeting where we sort of posed kind of very open-ended questions about hopes and aspirations for the board, and you guys got some ideas down, and we've sort of digitized those. And I think what we want to do is both have you all collectively reflect on what was captured in those questions, and then use that as an on-ramp to discuss the vision, mission, and beliefs. And really that is about fundamentally looking at those foundational documents and testing them against the board's vision and values. And we've sort of set up some stations over here that we're going to kind of break up into groups and spend some time getting ideas down, looking at the current vision, mission, and beliefs. And getting your reflections. And one thing I would say that, we do this work quite a bit, and I think, it's very important to make good word choices. And so I think today, we're probably not going to get into a lot of wordsmithing, but we do really want to try to create a structure to capture your thinking so that we can shape any updates to the foundational documents and to reaffirm what's really powerful and good in them. And I think there's a lot of value in sort of constancy over time. And so I think we're excited to have you engage in a conversation looking at the documents and capturing that information. And if we do our jobs right, we're hopeful that we'll have a good, rich set of feedback on those core documents from you all as really a sort of starting point for this work. So that's one of our big aims, and then with the latter half, I think we're going to facilitate a conversation to think about community engagement, and just specifically really want to offer some space for you all to think about what you'd like to hear from the community. We, I think there's lots of means for communicating out, but we really want to offer the board an opportunity to input on what are the key questions that we need to know from our community as we start this work and as staff go out into the community and gather input, like what are the key questions that you as board members want to have answered from our community. So those are our two sort of big aims for the day. One thing I did want to, and I don't know if the slides can be put up. Yeah, thank you. So just the agenda on the second slide is, this is just just to remind us, so we're going to go through the mission, vision, and beliefs, and then have the community engagement conversation. One of the things on the next slide we wanted to emphasize was just the idea that we remain student-focused and forward-looking in these conversations. So the current mission, vision, and beliefs are on the slide there, which would be the slide number 4, I believe. And so what we'd like to do is actually, before we move into getting ideas down, we'd like to give you guys a chance to do some reflection. So I'm going to hand out, I have the notes from the last board meeting that when you guys responded to the questions, what do you believe are the hopes, aspirations, and dreams that our community has for its students? And what are the skills and mindsets our children need for success in this rapidly changing, complex post-COVID world? So we have those ideas captured here, and I'm also going to give you this, Lloyd, as well. So we're going to give you a chance, because I think one of the things that we felt was really important was to start with those really open questions about values and direction. So we're going to give you a chance to read what you and your fellow board members recorded there, and then there's a reflection document that has a few questions as well. So we'd love for you to take about, I think, probably 7 minutes to take time to both read what you all captured and to take some notes for yourselves as to how these things reflect on the current mission, vision, and beliefs. And the last thing I would say, if we can go to the next slide, one of the things that we did want to emphasize, and just in having this conversation, I know the staff started thinking about revising the strategic plan on the typical 5-year cycle, which this plan was adopted in 2014, so that would have been 2019. And so there was some initial work that was led by Dr. Gardner and some other folks to begin to think about a refresh of the strategic plan, which of course then COVID hit, and that changed a lot of things as well. But we did want to also show you one of the documents, or one of the sort of foundational statements that evolved in that early process, the 2019 strategic planning process, was this intent statement. So in the slide that's up there now, in some of the conversations with stakeholders and folks in schools and communities at the time, the intent statement was sort of an evolved version of the vision statement. So we thought, because that work had already started, that it would be worth you guys considering the intent statement and the vision statement together, as they do sort of represent a different, they have a different set of choices in terms of what they lay out for the district. Being that the intent statement, really emphasizes learning, relationships, and service as well. I don't know if you want to share anything about that work.
Thank you, Michael. I'll just add a couple of comments, and certainly welcome Superintendent Moore adding to this as well. As we were beginning to do focus sessions before pre-COVID at elementary, middle, and high schools, and hearing from our students groups, administrator groups, teacher groups, we began to hear some things that were really important to address in this next version of the strategic plan. And starting to take that work, we began to explore how that could look in a statement that drives our work. So we began to explore whether the vision could migrate itself into what is known as an intent statement. And some of the things that were served as focus groups that we clearly heard from our students, our teachers, and administrators is relationships, the solid focus on learning, and the service that's provided. Service, whether it be transportation, child nutrition, health and behavioral service, mental services. And so we began to take those 3 broad areas we heard as need and began to explore how it might look in a statement that every student deserves the right to. And so that's why you see this evolution on this page. It could look this way if we decide that it reflects what we need to focus on. It was based on data and based on some input, and we wanted to share that with you, that evolution in relationship to this vision, just to test that idea with you and to see if it reflects what you gave, the input that you gave last time together. So it's also important to note that one of the things we heard in the last strategic plan is, do I see myself in the plan and do I see myself connected? And so those three broad areas provides us an opportunity potentially to make sure every division in our district is represented in some way, whether it be in the relationships, the learning academic piece, and the service piece that supports schools. So that's why we wanted to put them together on the same page in combination for you to look at both and give some feedback from some preliminary work that started pre-COVID.
Great. Thank you.
Superintendent Moore, anything else you want to add to that?
I'll just add that we actually sort of started it by backwards mapping into looking at the barriers or the things that our kids face that don't make it so that they're not successful within our district. And so it's almost like you start with what's the problem we're trying to solve, which we've heard that a lot before as a starting place, and that is what morphed into the intent statement, because we'd always also heard a lot about the prior strategic plan being very good in terms of the focus areas that it did have, but also understanding that there were places that were missing out of it, in particular like the services piece and what the relationships, and breaking that down a little bit more. So that's where this intent statement came from.
So we want to test both of them with you as far as aligning to the input you gave last time to see what might resonate or might be missing as far as capturing the input that you provided. So thank you for letting us put it on the same page together.
So with that, I'm going to give you guys about 7 minutes, and what I'd like you to do is basically take the compiled feedback from the last board meeting and just read through that, and then I think I'd like you to then use the note sheet that we have that really has kind of sections for vision, intent statement, mission, and core beliefs, and just sort of as a pre-work sort of activity, capture some of your sort of thinkings about whether the aspirations that you see in the vision and intent statement are matched by the things you saw in the kind of collective feedback that you provided at the last meeting. So we're going to take about 7 minutes to capture that thinking, and then we're going to move into sort of group reflection specifically on the vision, intent statement, mission, and beliefs. All right, so we'll take 7 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next section. right, take about 30 seconds to finish your individual reflection. All right. So now we're going to move into a section of the agenda where we're going to move to the tables over here, and we're going to we're going to look at both the vision and intent statement, mission and beliefs. And what we're going to ask you to do, we're going to divide you into two groups of three. And we really, I think, wanted to give you guys an individual chance to reflect both on your ideas from the last time, but then to kind of move together to capture your ideas and respond to each other's ideas on these three foundational documents. And I think the easiest way to do that is through grouping and having folks get ideas down on Post-it notes. So what we're going to ask you to do is at each of the tables, we have green Post-it notes that are really about things that resonate. So as you look at the belief statements and the mission statement and the vision statement, things that feel powerful, feel like things that we want to be constant in the district's fundamental foundational documents. And then the blue Post-it notes are for questions and suggestions for additions. And so we kind of want to have both of those things. And what we're going to do is then we're going to have each group work on first the vision, then mission and beliefs, and then we'll rotate. And then I think what we'll gather over time is kind of the collective ideas of board members. And so we'd encourage you in the second round, when you get one of the documents that is already marked up and has your fellow board members' feedback, we'd encourage you to respond to that, especially things that really resonate and make and sort of you agree with. We'd ask you to put more green Post-it notes next to them with sort of explanations, as well as additions. And what we hope to get in the end is a really good artifact of the board in dialogue about the mission, vision, and beliefs. And after we we'll spend about 25 minutes over there working on these documents, and then we'd love to come back together and debrief this. Both some of the things that you saw aligning or not aligning to the activity we did on the 18th, some passion points from the board members, and also I think one of the things that we have been talking a lot about, and I think intentionally didn't build into this design, is what does this look like in action? We're not getting into that today. We're really focused on the kind of foundational documents, but no doubt there are questions and there are ideas about how do we put this into action. So we want to have a conversation about that. And then I think the next steps after that will really be to compile what you guys have captured and see what that looks like in terms of a reaffirmed set of guiding documents for the board. And then we'll move into the conversation about community engagement and how what key questions the board members would like to direct the staff to sort of ask the community about. So with that, I am going to split us up into groups. I think so. Group A, which is going to be the first table, is going to be Ms. Carter, Mr. Hegarty, and Ms. Johnson-Hostler, and then Table B, Mr. Martin, Ms. Mahaffey, and Ms. Scott. And Frederica's going to keep us on time, and we'll have table facilitators over there, and then after we've captured our thinking, we'll come back here, do a debrief, and then talk community engagement. Sound good?
Okay, so we are going to take some time and debrief our small group activities. So I'm just going to pose a couple of questions for discussion based on your review of your notes from the last time that we were together, and then your review of the vision intent statement, the mission, and the core beliefs. So just in reflecting, what alignment or misalignment did you see or hear when reflecting on the foundational statements and your input that you provided on the January 18th session? So what alignment or misalignment did you notice?
So do you mean on any of the statements from mission, intent, belief all the way through, or are we starting someplace specific?
No place specific.
Okay. Well, I'll just start. I'll say this. There were some things that we identified in this document that just don't fit neatly into any of the other boxes. We saw in that exercise, one of the other groups had made comments about maintenance operations and support staff and other things that we've talked about different ways in this process. Our roles as stewards of our resources, right? How we operate as an employer, that, you know, we know that the focus and the intent is about students and student growth and all the services we provide to students, but there was a recognition of ourselves as an organization and an entity. And that didn't really fit in, didn't seem to be incorporated in any of the documents. And at best, maybe you could shoehorn it into 6, but it just seemed like that was being left out. And I'd hate to see that left out. You know, just the other areas of potential. I mean, I think there were strong areas of alignment throughout. Our group noticed there were a couple themes or values that we talked about in this document that the other group had added in different places. We were open to adding them there or adding them elsewhere. There was talk, I think, what were the two phrases? Student voice, and there was another one very similar, like student agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that I thought, you know, our group had identified a couple different places where that could be incorporated based on the suggestions of the other group. And then it's not so much the misalignment, but the whole intent statement. I think we had some fair criticism of, in terms of what it really meant, what it was saying or projecting. You know, this promise that, well, you know, students will experience these things. Well, what does that mean? You know, we put them on the table and maybe you eat it, maybe you don't. You know, there wasn't, as opposed to the vision statement, which was talking about, you know, the students will be prepared to do this, presented to do this. It was more about the final product, the final impact on the students. The intent statement just seemed very weak compared to that, in my opinion.
I mean, I'll sort of build off of that. I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I mean, I think the deficiency of our current strategic plan is there just isn't that organizational component, whether it's facilities, sustainability, the health of the organization, right? We talk about relationships for students, but what about students to staff, staff to administrators, administrators to staff, right? All that organizational stuff, if we don't, I mean, we like to use the language student-focused. What does that mean, right? Sometimes we hear a lot from, you know, parents when they get upset. You should just be teaching math and reading, and that's about it. Well, you can't just do that, right? You got to have a whole organization that's that you know, you just teach reading until the buses don't run, right? And then you need an organization where the buses run. So I think an organizational component needs to be part of our vision and mission. You know, when I looked at what we've got here versus some of our comments, I'll just emphasize, as I wrote down on a couple places, that I think we need to be careful. There's a real push right now, even at DPI and other places, to become a skills trainer, a job trainer. And I think it was Heather pointed out in our group, that schools never were the place to train you for a job, right? You learn stuff, but then you'd apprentice or, take an internship or, right? Schools weren't the trainer for the job in many, many settings. You would go with what you learn from the school, right? It's to the specific job, and then you get the on-the-job training. And I think that's what we heard from the business community loud and clear last time, where the 4 Cs came from. Because if you give us the 4 Cs, we can do the specific training once we got them on the job. If we just have training and we don't have the 4 Cs, that'll work for maybe now, but it's not going to work for a few years down the road. So keeping the 4 Cs, and we just want to be really, I think we want to be careful, because the jobs language, the skills, the training language is becoming really popular right now. But I think we need to keep the bigger vision. You mentioned the self-agency. I'd really like to see that in there, because as I read through a lot of our belief statements and whatnot, one can get the impression that a lot of it is what we will do for the student. And don't get me wrong, we have a lot of responsibility to do for the student, particularly creating opportunity, supporting, encouraging, challenging. But we're on the lacking side of the self-agency. The 4 Cs require some of that, but if the student doesn't bring it to the table, the educational system can't just get you where you want to be. I also noted, particularly with our belief, I'd love to see us get language that public school is about we, it's about the public, it's about us. But we're in a time where education is again, too many people are looking at it about the me. What will it do for my kid? Will my kid get into the right college and get the right job, et cetera? And that is a really, really valuable byproduct of a good education. But the purpose of education, from its very beginning, the purpose of education in a democracy is the us. Because if we don't have a broadly educated population, then we fail as a society. If it's all about me and my kid getting ahead, then we become an entitlement organization, and I got to get ahead of you. If we talk about education as being the great equalizer, it's only the great equalizer if we make sure that we have opportunity for everybody. That's the us. That's not necessarily the me. So I'd love to see that become a little bit more a belief in our next version.
And I think as we talk about student agency and student voice, also making sure that we talk about student health and well-being, I think that is one of the things that we talked about pre-pandemic, but certainly during this time, the need for that to be upfront and knowing its impact on the academic piece for our students, I think is really important that we acknowledge.
So let's also think about, are there any passion points that surface that you feel were not currently reflected or represented in the vision statement, the mission statement, or the core beliefs?
I think we may have addressed some of that just in our last answers.
Does anyone have any additional thoughts? Just wanted to make sure.
I think one of the things that I kept reading was, does the community understand what this means? Does this translate to where someone in the community can look at that and know what that means? And I think highlighted specifically was the phrase full potential. And what does that mean for a student?
We're not going to get it perfect, but language is a key, right? We talk about being highly effective. Highly effective at what? Your full potential is another great example, right? We want to succeed. What does succeed mean? So watching our language and being as specific as possible and understanding it communicates this to this audience, but it may communicate something completely different to another audience, I think will be really important.
Thank you all for that. So I just have one question, just to begin thinking about. We won't move all the way into this today, but just to prime for future conversations. As we think about our post-COVID world, we want to think about how the vision, mission, and core beliefs might be put into action. So again, just to prime the pump, but if you have any initial reactions to that question, how should the vision, mission, and core beliefs be put into action? We'd be open to hearing if you have that now.
I think that getting it into action goes, two ways. And I think, while it's important that we know that this needs to be an actionable piece, I think it's also important that we hear from the people who are in charge of those actions as well. What does that mean for our teachers? What does that mean for our administrators, our IAs, for our maintenance and operation workers? And so making sure that we know what we can do for them, knowing that these folks are the ones supporting our students, I think that can also help inform how we look at it from a policy level at the board.
So I guess I'd offer, as we think about getting things into action, I see two sort of polarized ways that you can get action take place. One is compliance. You will do this. And the other is more empowerment, that says, here's sort of the goals, here's our support structure to help you do it. And so however we implement, I'd love to see us work towards the empowerment side of that continuum and shy away from the compliance side. I mean, there are things that you have to comply to, but a lot of what we're talking about here, if we sort of go the compliance route, we're going to lose the creativity both of the student and of the teacher and of the administrator.
Thank you all for thinking about that. And again, we will come back and ask that question in multiple ways. So this is just to start to think about what that looks like in taking the vision, mission, and beliefs and translating that into action.
So the last thing that we'd like to do with the remaining time to 4:30 is, I think, and I thank you for engaging in that process. I think we have a lot of information that we can kind of gather, a lot of sort of ideas reaffirmed, but I think also some kind of ideas bubbling up for how we might update these documents. I think the last part of this conversation that we'd love to have is just thinking about the community and how we want to gather feedback from the community. And, in working with staff, I mean, we talked about a lot, like the board advisory committees and the faith community and the business community, IHEs, using thought exchange across the communities. And just even some of the things that, it may be easier in some respects now, kind of after COVID, to gather digital feedback in new and inventive ways. So less today we're talking about the means of communicating, but actually what are the core questions? So we kind of wanted to spend the last 20 minutes of this conversation asking you as board members, what do you want to hear from the community? So as staff put together a plan through the spring to gather feedback, what are the key questions that we need to know? Because I know in our work with you all that has been so central to your vision as a board, is how do we engage the community in a conversation? So I think for the last part of this, we'd just love to hear what key feedback you feel like we need from our community as we revise the strategic plan. And Frederica is going to take some notes on chart paper as well. Ms. Scott.
I think it's important to recognize the different categories of stakeholders, and that communication can be centered to those stakeholders. Mainly, of course, speaking parents of current students, business, and then community at large. For me, those are the three main categories of stakeholders. And then, internally, of course, our employees. But I think as we're talking about community, noticing those and being able to think of how to be strategic to get to groups. Because the reality is we don't hear from people we should probably hear from the most. And that's through no one's fault, but it's very challenging to engage everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, and just building off of that, I didn't hear it, but I really would like a lot of student feedback as well for the internal part. And also, I know there's work on this already, but really supportive of including those who typically, because I heard, our board advisory council, a lot of times that excludes a lot of our family and community members, and trying to draw in possibly those who typically are not engaged, and looking to ensure any translation and interpretation services are put into place to expand that.
And just what are, and I think maybe picking up both on parents being mentioned, what do we feel like are the key things that we'd like to hear through this process, specifically from a parent audience?
Well, I think we want somewhat the same information from just about whatever the audience is, and I think we need to know, what works well and what doesn't work well. And somewhat related to that, what would you be willing to do to help make it change? Because, right, I cannot like something and I want you to fix it for me, but if there's not the resources there or whatnot, we can't do it. Are we going to go to the state? Are we going to go to the county? Are we going to go to where to get it? So, what works well, what doesn't work well, and what would you be willing to do to help make it change, I think would be really helpful information. And I think we need that from current students. I think we need that from parents, as others have noted, across demographics. I think we need it from alumni. And I think it would be wise to look at recent alumni and, I'd say, within the last 5 years, and those who have been out for maybe 10 to 15 years. So kind of two demographics of alumni. I think that these questions would be good to ask to employers on higher ed, whether that would be the same or whether that would be in a different group. They're somewhat related, but they're somewhat different. But I think those are kind of the sectors that, right, the employers in higher ed are the direct recipients of our product, if you will. I don't like to think about school as product, but to a degree, it sort of is. So we need to know, are we providing the product we need? Alumni are going to give us a different perspective, right? It's sort of like when you're raising your kids. You have a different conversation with your kid after they've graduated from college and are back home than you did when they were in middle school and high school. We need both experiences. We need both reflections.
So I'd been sort of deferring because we talked about some stuff in our group, and I don't want to take someone's answer, but a couple times we talked about how important it was for parents to understand what we're talking about, and that we can put out a sentence and we know the history behind it, we know what we're getting at, but if it's not self-evident, if it's not apparent to anybody reading it for the first time what it actually means, then what value does it have? Is it any good? Is it effective? So that's something in the feedback, in the engagement, we need to make sure that people understand, what we're talking about, and they understand what our intent is. And if what we've said doesn't match, if their interpretation of what we said doesn't match the intent of what we said, then we probably need to revise it.
I think there's another component of this that, is given what the county and everybody has been through globally in the last 2 years, does that raise a different set of questions than let's say, if we go back 3 years and would ask our community for feedback on what matters now for the school system? Are there a different set of questions that are informed by what we've all been through over the last 2 years?
To be honest, I don't really think so. I mean, if you look from there are details that are different, but I think our big questions are still the same. Because are you equipped to live in, what do we say it? To lead productive lives in a complex and changing world? Basically, we got a trial. Are we equipped to live in a complex and changing world? I don't think our grade is going to be very good in terms of our ability to adapt to a complex and changing world. And we kind of got lucky with this pandemic in spite of how bad it is. We got a trial run, but we need those skills to be able to adapt. There's going to be more.
Yeah, I echo exactly what you said. I wasn't going to respond because I'm like, I don't think the questions are different. I think the lesson we learned is, no, we were not prepared to adapt. And one of the things our group talked about is the word relative, right? Like the education being relative, but also relative to the time. And I said this and I will say it publicly. I don't think the educational institution was designed for change. I think it was designed to stay the same, and we literally hit our heads, and I mean we, the collective, this country, globally, hit our head against that ever-changing wall that's been there since the institution began. So I think what we wrote is absolutely aspirational, and we as human beings were not ready. And I think, I'll use your word, Ms. Carter, we were not fluid. And I think you're right. I think education has been applauded and lauded for its stalwartness, but that did not work for us, for anyone. And I think the questions have to be the same, and I think the public, and like all of us, will have a very different lens after hitting our head against a wall that didn't really work for a change. And it was a drastic change that was before us.
And it wasn't just us who didn't change, right? The public didn't want the change either.
I said collective.
Yeah,
I don't mean.
I just wanted, we're in complete agreement. I
Yeah.
just wanted to reemphasize that nobody wanted to change. Nobody still
Well, I
wants to
think,
change.
I think my point is human nature is not
Right.
designed to accept change.
Right.
It's the only thing that's constant, and it is also the constant thing we don't accept.
Exactly.
So what I'm hearing is we should expect different answers.
Let's hope so.
Is there anything else, as you guys think about and we close out this part of the session, I think, we just really want to open, if there are particular questions, as you think about working within your communities and the kind of questions that as we shape the strategic plan and we shape things like specific actions, are there any additional kind of questions that you would set up the staff to go out and ask the community to inform your decision making?
I think and Chris said this earlier in our group, I think the question that the only real feedback I came with is, what's more important to us? Is it what we say or what we put in writing, or is it about what we want people to understand from what we're doing? And I think education has a tendency to write what we want, and that is not always resonating with the audience that it's intended for. And so that is actually my question, is when staff are developing this, I think we have to ask people directly to allow them to use their own language so that we can be reflective. And I use a term, I'm not an educator, so every time I read something like, that's edgy speak, and it's taking me 20 times to read it to know what you actually mean. And I think that's one of the things that keeps a lot of parents at bay from the educational institution, is because it's not written in a way that resonates with them. And we like that, right? Because we as educators like it because it resonates with us, but most parents are not educators. And we also know most of Wake County residents also don't have students. And so I'd like to hear from the public what language really resonates with them. How would they describe, right? So one of the words that I liked was student voice. I don't know that resonates with anybody. Like, I would like for us to be able to try out some of the things, like the word citizenship. The other group used it. I was like, I don't know what that means. And I'm sitting at the table, and I'm like, I have no idea what you mean by that word. So I'd like for us to try out some of the words on the public so that we can actually create something that resonates.
All right. Well, I think, so I just really appreciate you all being willing to engage in this conversation. I think we got a lot of really great information down in terms of kind of revising. I think I'm walking away feeling like there's a lot of the things that are in the strategic plan are very much reaffirmed, but I also think but that document is at this point 8 years old, and I think there's some good ideas that we heard coming out of both what you put on the paper as well as the conversation that I think can guide revisions and shaping that as well. And then I think obviously there's a lot of work to be done to talk about what does it look like in action. Like Frederica said, I mean, I think we intentionally didn't want to really have that conversation today because there's just so much to get into, but I think this gives us great guidance moving forward. So we really appreciate your time and engagement in the session.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much, and we look forward to seeing you again for the next iteration of this conversation.
We look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Up next, we are going to be talking about curriculum and learning, specifically a letters program update and an overview of Wake Up and Read. So we have some folks from the academic side of our house, led by Drew Cook and Michelle Woodson, coming to join us.
We ready? Good
Here,
afternoon.
so ready. Good afternoon. We're so glad you could be here today.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey, Superintendent Moore, and board members. We do appreciate the opportunity to bring to you an update today on a couple of important and ongoing curriculum and learning initiatives that are occurring in the district, both of which, Ms. Mahaffey, as you referenced, are related to reading and literacy instruction. I will note up front, this is a little bit of a makeup day for us. This is a presentation and discussion that had been planned for the Student Achievement Committee that was canceled in January due to inclement weather. So after being delayed for a couple of weeks, we're excited to be in front of you today to share this topic. So to set the groundwork and for the presentation and discussion, we'll start with a little bit of context just to help illustrate the compelling why that drives much of the work that we'll share and highlight this afternoon. This is not necessarily new information, but we do think it's certainly worth restating as reference points. According to the 2019 National Assessment of Educational Progress, known as NAEP, 36% of North Carolina fourth graders are proficient in reading, or were at that time. Disaggregated, the data clearly shows disparities by race, ethnicity, and income. Specifically, 40% of white children in North Carolina are reading proficiently. However, only 20% of black children and 23% of Hispanic children are reading proficiently. For North Carolina children who are eligible for free or reduced lunch, which includes almost 60% of students, only 21% are reading proficiently. Nationally, students in higher income families are making gains at a rate nearly twice that of students in low-income families. White male students nationwide are 3 times more likely to be reading proficiently in the 4th grade than their African-American peers, and more than twice as likely to be reading proficiently as Hispanic boys. The causes of these disparities are long-standing and at times complex. I think Ms. Johnson-Hotzler was just referencing some of this, which at least in part have been connected to historical systems and structures that have perpetuated inequities associated with race and with poverty. And the sobering reality, in fact, is that Wake County is not and has not been immune to these realities, including some similar gaps in student performance outcomes that have been occurring over time at the state and the national levels. So within that backdrop and national and state level context, which of course the Wake County Public School System is a part of, On this slide, we'll reshare a graphic and maybe more importantly, a foundational belief that you're probably familiar with, and that is that literacy is a right and not a privilege. More than a logo or even a statement of belief, this really is a call to action. And today, one of the actions that we'll discuss and share with you involves the LETRS professional learning for elementary teachers and leaders. And again, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, as a nod to your reference to EduSpeak and acronyms, let me up front say that LETRS is an acronym, and it stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. This professional learning is and will be a huge lift for the Wake County Public School System and for the state of North Carolina, where this work is occurring now in every district. However, we see this effort as a sound investment of both time and of our resources that will provide teachers across our district and the state with the knowledge and skill sets that they need to teach students to read in a way that we believe can end the long-standing data trends and disparities that we just referenced. Additionally, in another program that you may at least be familiar with, the Wake Up and Read Coalition has continued, even in the midst of the pandemic, to distribute books to students while working to provide our students, families, and communities with the resources and supports that they need to ensure that literacy is, in fact, a right for all students. So with that bit of context and background in mind, at this time I'll turn it over to Senior Director of Curriculum Development, Michelle Woodson, along with Sean Johnson, who is our new K-12 Literacy Director, to take us first into an update on LETRS. Michelle?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope you all are well today. Today we're here to give you an update on the professional learning for pre-K and elementary teachers around LETRS, again, language essentials for the teaching of reading and spelling that focuses on the science of reading. Our intended outcomes today include a review of LETRS professional learning that's beginning this winter of 2022. Actually, our first cohort began last Thursday. A review of the timeline of the completion of the professional learning and next steps, as well as some strategies that we are working on to help support our teachers through this process. So just a little bit of background I've shared before. The State Board of Education approved a 3-year contract with Voyager Sforis Learning to provide the LETRS essential for teachers of reading and spelling training to the state's teachers. This training is a part of the science of reading, changes made to the Read to Achieve legislation, which is SB 387, the Excellent Public Schools Act. This training is for educators working with children pre-K through 5, and as you know, Wake County has been a leader in this work, and we're very proud of that fact. In 2019, 2020, this board approved funding to begin the training of LETRS for our literacy coaches and school teams. Today, we want to give you an overview of where we are in the process of this state contract as well, and our plans for continued training and implementation across the district. So the knowledge gained from the LETRS professional learning for teachers will allow them to make key decisions as students respond to the word recognition and language comprehension components of the pre-K to second grade curricula. LETRS provides teachers with research, depth of knowledge, and tools to teach language and literacy skills to every student. Our current LETRS training will guarantee a baseline of knowledge for all elementary teachers in Wake County Public Schools and across the state. And with this, teachers will be able to insert their own expertise and creativity into their instruction. So Wake County has been assigned to the state cohort number 2, which is slated to begin winter of 2022, where we are currently. In August, the contract that I previously mentioned amended the cohort to include all pre-K through 5th grade teachers, 1 school instructional support staff member, elementary EC resource teachers, and elementary ELL teachers, in addition to each school sending 1 administrator to a 2-day overview for the LETRS administrator training. All pre-K teachers will attend the LETRS training for early childhood educators as well as the North Carolina DCDEE, which is another acronym to say the North Carolina Division of Child Development and Early Education, and DPI are working with the cohort of individuals as well. Here are the components of the training. Pre-K teachers will independently engage in online instruction and professional development, 4 full days of professional development over the course of the year. 1 year, forgive me. For elementary, K-5, special education, literacy coaches, and ELL teachers, letters is a total of 8 units. Volume 1 is 4 units, and Volume 2 is 4 units, for a total of 8. Teachers will independently engage in online instruction for each unit, a bridge to practice exercise, and embedded video modeling of instruction. In addition, professional learning is provided virtually or face-to-face this spring. It will be virtually for each unit, for each of the total of 8 days of professional learning over the course of 2 years. One school-based administrator will attend a 2-day professional letters for administrator training. So we're excited about the work that is ahead. I'd like at this time to introduce you to Sean Johnson, our new Director of Literacy, as he's going to talk a little bit more about where we are in implementation.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, all. So we wanted to give you a little more information about the state implementation plan. As Michelle mentioned, my apologies. So this is a statewide 3-year process. We want to call that out just to kind of give you an idea of exactly the length of time that our teachers will be engaging. It's for all designated staff in North Carolina with a projected completion date of December 2024. Now, Wake has a projected completion date of spring 2024. So we should finish in the spring of 2024, barring any setbacks or issues that may arise for whatever reason. In addition, institutions of higher education are working to ensure that the science of reading is incorporated in their instructional process. We're really excited about that because that's going to give an added layer to our teachers who are coming into the system, and letters won't be the first, it won't be the first time they're seeing letters or participating in letters when they come to us. So the higher institutions, colleges, they're working on incorporating this into their instructional process so that we'll have a little more support. And that will also give us ensure a baseline of knowledge for all elementary teachers in the state of North Carolina. So here's a breakdown of the timeline for Wake County's implementation. Currently, as Michelle mentioned, we are engaging in Unit 1. We hope to have that completed. All teachers will have that completed by June 30th. So by the end of the spring, we should be out of Unit 1. In the fall of 2022, we will engage in Units 2 and 3. In the spring of 2023, we will engage in Units 4 and 5. In the fall of 2023, we will engage in Units 6 and 7. And in the spring of 2024, we will conclude with Unit 8. So that's a breakdown of the timeline that our teachers will be engaging in this work over the course of the next 2 years. So we've worked to ensure that the face-to-face professional learning in Wake County occurs on teacher workdays in the spring so that teachers do not have to leave their classrooms or complete this learning at night or on the weekends. So we were very intentional with our planning to make sure that teachers would not have to engage in this work on any of their own personal time. So we were very intentional in making sure that the training occurred on work days so that there are no nights and weekends. The online portion of the learning, which they're currently going to be engaging in, is a 6-hour synchronous session in the spring of 2022. Now, The sessions that occur after spring of 22 will either be in person or synchronous. We're waiting on letters to let us know if a ban has been lifted. So right now we are engaging in synchronous online, but letters may come back next year. That ban may be lifted and we may have to regroup and prepare for some face-to-face training. Teachers also have access to their online portal, so each teacher gets a license. They have access to an online portal, and they also have text for their individual reference. So to begin this experience, all schools held a letters kickoff event where teachers viewed a welcome video from our superintendent and heard testimonials from teachers at Timber Drive Elementary who have already participated in this training earlier this year. When you have a moment, we encourage you to watch this video that launches our letters professional learning. The kickoff also includes a welcome video from the state superintendent and directions on how to access their online accounts. So all teachers viewed this video prior to getting started. It had all of the necessary information to get them started, as well as a message from our superintendent, state superintendent, and other teachers and staff within the county who had already engaged in this work. The first training began with Track 3 teachers on February the 10th. So a few things we wanted to note that we have done to support teachers in this work include, one, scheduling. So we mentioned earlier that we scheduled our trainings on work days so that it would not be on nights and weekends. We were very intentional in that, and we wanted to make sure that teachers did not have that added layer of having to do work outside of their regular work schedule. Another thing that we did that was very intentional was the work that we've done to support them in their PLTs, and that is we've provided them with suggested pacing on how they can engage in this work, as well as some guided questions that the PLTs can engage in as they're having conversations when they meet. A third thing that we wanted to call out was curriculum alignment. We felt like this was really important. The resources that we provide to our teachers should align to the professional development that they are receiving. So we have our new K-1 structure, which is aligned with the simple view of reading, and it provides resources by way of text, as well as we've provided professional development to our literacy coaches, and we also have language comprehension lessons to make sure that there is a well-packaged alignment of resources. So Wake County, okay. Wake County has also committed to offering a stipend to teachers who complete the professional learning and master the content. And we're so thankful and grateful that our district believes in this work and will support our teachers in gaining this content. In the coming months, we're going to come back to you with finalized professional learning dates for fall of 22 through spring of 2024. As we're finalizing these dates, it is likely that there may be some calendar adjustments in order to accommodate teachers and this learning. So we may come back to you and say that we've run into some bumps with regards to the current calendars that are proposed, and we may need to make some adjustments so that we can accommodate this learning. So at this time, we're going to allow for any questions that you may have around the letters professional learning.
Vice Chair Hagerty.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and welcome.
Thank you.
So I'd like to offer some, what I hope is constructive feedback.
Okay.
And I do this from a position, Mr. Cook is smiling because he's heard me do this before. I know a lot of this information is typically rolled out in our student achievement meetings, and the way we have our committees structured, those meetings are typically held on a day where I have a professional conflict from my job, and so I don't know what else may have been presented on this before. I don't know if I'm coming to it with less information than the rest of my fellow board members. For me, I see this presentation, and I would like to know what these changes mean for students, for staff, and for parents. and I'd like to know, how is this different than what we're doing now? And I think you did a good job of answering some of the questions about how it will be different from teachers. You've given very good, detailed information about preparation and training, rollout of the program, support for teachers, and I think you've given us a lot of good information to make us feel confident about how this is being rolled out and presented. But unless it was presented at earlier meetings, committee meetings that I wasn't attended, and for anyone who might be just watching our work session, I still don't really know what the science of reading is. And like the video that was presented pops up on slide 12. I mean, I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch it, but I just wonder, you know, in a work session presentation, I know this was originally a committee presentation and may have had more context, may have had more background behind it, but I just feel lost, like I'm still not sure, you know, where, you know, I'm not sure of all the science and the background behind it. So I just offer that as background. I will go back, I'll review these materials, and I'll go back to past committee meetings to learn more. But I just offer that as a suggestion.
And Mr. Haggerty, I was smiling under my mask. I think that's fair feedback, and this is a topic that we have brought to Student Achievement Committee before. That said, I think it's important, to your point, that we do articulate every time we're discussing letters training and using a phrase, edu-speak, like the science of reading, that we provide the context in layman's terms of what that really means. And I think, to your point, what does this mean in terms of a changing instructional strategy that our teachers will deploy to better teach reading to our kids? And I may turn to Sean or Michelle to just provide a brief synopsis in layman's terms as much as we can right now. But I think it's fair feedback, and certainly, irrespective of whether we're in a Student Achievement Committee meeting or this meeting, we can get in the habit of defining those terms every time we present.
And I did just want to add to that, Vice Chair, that it was the September 27th, I think, September 27th Student Achievement Committee. But the point that you raised is important, because I think even during that meeting, I recall saying something, and Superintendent Moore said, "Wait a minute, we started this many years ago," and I think, oh yeah, that's right. So it is a good reminder for all of us.
Yeah, and I'm so thankful for that question as well, because it just shows that you have an interest in learning more about what it is that we're engaging in and what our teachers and students will be getting from it. So I'll give you the short answer. The science of reading is exactly that. So there is brain research behind how students learn how to read. What happens in the brain as they're learning to read? Unfortunately, and I can speak from my own experience, there are a lot of teachers that don't understand that process, right? You're not taught that in methods courses, or you haven't traditionally been taught that in methods courses. And the problem with that is when you have a student that is struggling with a particular aspect of learning to read, and you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, you're not really able to effectively help them. So to answer your question, in engaging in this professional learning, you now have a better understanding of what's going on. And the reference I was going to make is I taught 3rd and 4th grade. Traditionally, you're not teaching foundational skills at that level. I had a lot of students that came to me who had not cracked the code at that K1 level. A 3rd and 4th grade teacher now who's engaging in this learning will be better equipped to support a student that comes to them, because they'll understand the why. So that's the short answer, but we can certainly talk more about it.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Martin.
Mr. Haggerty, the question you raised, I think, is an absolutely important one. And I've noted before here and other settings as well, while there is a lot of good stuff in what's going on in the PD, anytime you see anybody add the science of fill in the blank, you can be assured that that is promoting what I call the bias of objectivity. Because the only reason I need to tell you it's the science of, or it's research-based, is because I'm going to try to tell you that mine's better than yours. That's the only reason you do that. And we do that in many, many disciplines. So this is not a critique at the science of reading. They've just been one of the many who has piled on to this bias of objectivity, because if it's science-based, it therefore must be better, right? Reading is a non-natural process. Reading is something that the general person has only been doing for what? 150, 200 years maybe at most. And humans have been around a lot longer than that. So reading is not a natural process. There are things that the science of reading, I think, gets right. We learn stuff all the time about, cognitive development. But to your question, what's going to happen 5, 10 years from now? Are we going to all of a sudden have that 35 or 46% proficient in reading change? I pray to God that I'm wrong, but I doubt it. These numbers have been the numbers that we've seen for a very, very, very long time, and I don't see there's going to be a big change. Some companies are going to make some money because they've got a product to sell. Some legislators are going to have a bill that passed to say, we're going to take care of making sure everybody reads to the third grade. You want to get more people reading at the third grade? Get an instructional assistant in every K-3 classroom. What you need, the only thing that we've really seen that really makes a big difference in reading is having more people sitting down one-on-one with people, practicing, repeating, learning strategies, and whatnot. So to your question, there's a lot of good stuff in this whole process, but if we really want to see change, if we're not putting people in the classrooms, you can have the best curriculum in the world. And I hate to be an old fart, but my prediction is 5, 10 years down the road, we're not going to see much difference in the numbers.
Ms. Carter.
Thank you. And I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Dr. Martin, you were saying, and I know I brought it up before, but I'm going to bring it up again because you know I am. And because there are a lot of instructional assistants providing this support in the small groups, and I still don't see, and I understand, I'm not saying, oh, they got to come first. I'm just asking, do we have, at this point, I've asked before, any kind of idea about when they may be added to some level of professional development? Because I think it's imperative that they receive that since they are doing a lot of the hands-on and one-on-one or smaller settings.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your question. We do have a letters facilitator team, and we do recognize that is a need, and we are designing professional development for the assistants, the instructional assistants.
Should be ready by July of 2022 is our plan.
And just to be clear, and Michelle and Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that goes above and beyond what the state stipulates and requires. That would be a Wake County initiative.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, the science of reading brings into focus a lot of things. We've gone back and forth over 50 years on different ways to learn to read. And what the thing that's different here really is about the requirement that all teachers receive the training on reading, because teachers have never graduated from institutions of higher education with an elementary certificate that were trained on how to teach reading. That was not a major component of the elementary curriculum in order to receive a teaching license. So one of the things that is different here will be that every teacher will be equipped with the knowledge and the background and the resources around those components that include, and if you look at the presentation from September, combines both the language comprehension pieces that we've known about forever and the word recognition pieces that we've known about forever. But it really is equipping the teachers with the knowledge and the background and the resources to do the work that is different this time. And we will see where it ends up in terms of how we access and really recognize what student needs are and respond to them based on the training that's given. That's the intent. Because I think the level of expertise that's needed, the resources, the tools in your own toolbox is what's being grown for teachers that previously has not been there before. And so I think that piece is just important to note, that it's been a very long time since school districts, an entire state, engaged in something systematic statewide for every single teacher as a baseline. It's a foundational piece for the classroom. And I think you have to start there and then add to it as needed, because we're going to continue to have to add to this as needed when we see what students' needs individually are.
Thank you. I did have a couple questions, and I so appreciate that this is, something that's important, but is being stretched out so that our teachers can absorb what they've learned, take it back to their classroom, ask more questions, and learn more. And certainly, the neuroscience piece, going back to it, we'll hopefully see more or less students, rather, that get to the fourth grade that need those fundamental pieces because we were able to address them sooner. How do we, and Ms. Carter, I knew you would take my IA question, but I so appreciate you asking it because they're so important in our students, especially in those younger grades. How do we keep this training up? I'm excited to hear that this is something that North Carolina is going to be implementing in their teacher training program, but as new teachers who either left the profession, come back, come from out of state, or if you're admin that's trained in this, move schools, how do we maintain that piece so it's not just something that, well, this team knows it and this team knows it, but one person on the team doesn't know it, so we all then have to teach this person?
Yeah, so we are heavily involved in that, certainly at this point in time, and will continue to be for years to come. We have created a cohort of facilitators already for units 1 through 4. They are in process of working on that for the second volume, which would be 5 through 8. So we have about 28 people currently that are going to become Wake County facilitators, and then we're also looking to create an additional cohort for that as well. But to your point, next year, I'm going to say summer for year-round, right? We are going to have multiple teachers that will be engaging in this work, some who are coming from college that have not had any experience, but we may have some from other districts that might be in different places because all districts are going to be engaging in this and are moving at different rates across the state. So we'll be creating cohorts that we will be able to start taking those teachers from where they are and helping to facilitate their learning as they need to continue on from there. And we're building our own infrastructure to make that happen so we can create that consistency.
And hoping that you'll also work with our family engagement folks so that parents can understand this.
Correct.
So, I mean, we know that this is a partnership in helping students learn to read, which will lead us to our next part of the presentation.
And you will hear a little bit about it then, yes.
But then I guess I'm curious, and this may be a question for a future time, is how can we, as we're looking at those foundational pieces and helping students stay on grade level with reading, what are the things that we can hope to catch? I know we hear a lot in reading from our families of students with dyslexia, and how can we help them? And I'd love to hear more about that, either at a future time, because we don't have much time left here, but I think that's an important part of how does this help our students as we can support them at an earlier age, because early intervention is the best kind of intervention.
Absolutely. And the LETRS professional learning is in direct alignment with the dyslexia work that needs to be happening. So that professional learning for our staff will only help that work, but we'll bring that back.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from my colleagues before? Okay.
Okay, I'll move to the second part of our presentation, and I'll say, kind of in closing up that conversation and moving to Wake Up and Read, and going back to Dr. Martin's comments and others, it really has to be a reminder to us that it's about people and not programs. And I think, Dr. Martin, your point is well taken. I think it is fair to be skeptical, historically speaking, in terms of the outcomes that we might or might not see. But I think it really does come down to our ability to promote this and live this out as a people-centered process and not a program, quote unquote, that we're implementing. And I think Wake Up and Read is an example of trying to live and work through this in practice as well moving forward. So thank you for that. So with that, I am happy to introduce to you Dr. Lori Krzyzewski, District Administrator for the Wake Up and Read program, who will take us through the second part of our presentation and share a little bit more about Wake Up and Read.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share about the work Wake Up and Read. By the end of the presentation, The hope is that you will have an increased understanding of the current work of Wake Up and Read, how the Wake Up and Read has connected with our community partners and has become aware of the shifts that have needed to be made as a result of the pandemic. We hope you'll increase awareness and understanding of where we need to go from here, have better understanding of the work that's been done with the Friday Institute and the Kellogg grant opportunity that we have, and the family leadership and early literacy liaison position that we are currently piloting. As you know, we're a community coalition of more than 30 partners working together to ensure that each and every child, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status, is reading on grade level by the end of third grade. We are incredibly grateful to have some of our partners here with us today. We do have with us Flo Thompson from Wake Tech, a professor of early childhood education, Melissa Oliver, assistant principal at Alston Ridge Elementary and the coordinator of books and barbershops, and those are off camera, and Blake Wiggs from the Friday Institute at NC State. I think it's really important for us to have our community partners here because they are an important part of this work. So for nearly a decade now, Wake Up and Read has served as the local affiliate of the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading here in Wake County. We're one of over 350 communities nationwide working to ensure that all children succeed in school and are graduating prepared for college and career, as well as active citizenship. Wake Up and Read participates in state and national learning communities, sharing research, data, evidence-based practices, as well as promising practices in our efforts to change the trajectory of children living in poverty to move on to be reading at grade level at third grade. Decades of research tell us that 3 key elements are necessary for strong brains and strong bodies. Children need to have health and development on track beginning at birth. They need supported and supportive families and communities. And they need access to high-quality birth to 8 learning environments with regular attendance. Guided by a collective impact framework, Wake Up and Read has organized around these key areas: school readiness, learning opportunities, and family engagement. We're working to ensure that the youngest children are arriving to our classrooms ready to learn, that there is access to high-quality learning environments within our schools and across our community, and that families are supported in their role as their child's first teacher. As a backbone agency, Wake County Public Schools supports the coordinated and strategic collaboration of our district and community partners, including the Consulate General of Mexico, Barbell's Kids Museum, Wake County Libraries, Wake Ed Partnership, Wake PTA, Wake Tech, Read and Feed, YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, amongst others. As coalition partners work together, they seek alignment across their programs and identify opportunities to collaborate. We try to find areas where we can stack strategies like programming with book distribution and enrollment in Ready for K to increase access to literacy resources and supports. For example, when a child is screened for pre-K or when a parent signs up for a class or a workshop, they may also receive books and have the opportunity to enroll in Ready for K. Ready for K is a family engagement curriculum that's delivered through 3 texts per week that offer a tip, a fact, and a suggestion for growth for families. The evidence-based program is designed to build the capacity of parents and caregivers to support learning at home with simple, easy-to-implement strategies at no cost to them. The program is designed for parents of babies and children up to 10 years old and is currently offered in 6 languages: English, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, Vietnamese, and Russian. By working together across agencies and programs, the coalition has been able to significantly increase the support offered to families through this program. Families only need to sign up once, and the age-appropriate curriculum is delivered and designed to grow with their child as they age. As you can see, over the course of time, now we have, that is our January 2022 number. I think we are a little bit higher than that, but now over 7,000 participants. Book distribution has long been a strategy of the coalition, initially designed to curb what's known as summer slide. Early on in the pandemic, the coalition partners were forced to really rethink and adapt the way we went about our book distribution to increase our impact, especially during a time when libraries and school buildings were closed and many students had even significantly decreased access to books. In addition to book distribution, the coalition partners continue to think differently about what families needed, how to reach them, and the pandemic really required us to work together in ways that we never had before. When the pandemic first hit, we used partner and family surveys to collect data, to quickly assess the needs, and to establish new strategies, and then to engage in a cycle of continuous improvement to figure out what was working and how we could best reach families. Throughout the pandemic, we continued our work with our 13 partner schools and 17 child care centers to increase book access and ownership for families, but expanded through the launch of Grab, Grow, and Read. Grab, Go, and Read was an effort to provide pre-packed, age-appropriate books for children, as well as information for families about how to access free resources for parents that would support literacy and learning in the home. In the early stages of the pandemic, we connected with new partners to establish different ways of reaching families. We began working with food distribution partners that were hosting COVID testing events. We began hosting pop-ups with volunteers at Family Dollar locations and outside of grocery stores. And in the very early stages of the pandemic, we offered drive-through events at the Wake Up and Read building. Through collaborating with partners, distributing food, furniture, technology, we've been able to significantly increase the number of children reached annually. Partners like Green Chair, Centro Parafamilias, Diaper Train, Neighbor Food Express, and others continue to safely provide books to families that may face barriers to book access and ownership. In January 2021, we set a very ambitious goal of collecting 200,000 books. With the support of the community, we were able to collect 188,000 books and continue the expanding work of building inclusive home libraries through a more systemic approach. We're excited this year to expand from our 13 partner schools to 15 schools this year. As a coalition, we're really working to build a community of literacy champions. Community leaders continue to help us raise awareness of the importance of early childhood literacy through campaigns like I Am a Reader. Our barbers support the work of the Books and Barbershop Initiative at 7 local shops and salons, while barbers and stylists use their time with children to talk about the importance of reading, while volunteers help children and families select books and share strategies for developing home literacy practices. We've learned that literacy and learning happens everywhere. As a coalition, we're committed to ensuring that books and literacy resources are accessible. It's important that all children can see themselves, their families, and their communities represented as they develop their identity as a reader. Our community partners are working hard together to ensure that children have access to high-quality learning experiences outside of school hours and creating accessible opportunities in multifaceted ways to enjoy literacy. Wake Tech students are creating story walks so that families can have a safe and fun way to share stories together. The Mexican Consulate has been a regular host of the story walks, where they pair books and resources for families, and families are able to enjoy the story walks while they're waiting for their services that are being provided inside. We've had story walks hosted at the villages at Washington Terrace, Green Road Library, Poland Park, Sanderford Road Park, Wendell Park, amongst others. As we've been out into the community talking with families, either enjoying a story walk, driving through for a COVID test, or picking up food, we've become increasingly aware of their concerns, their needs, as well as their will to support their child's learning. Many of these efforts have been made possible with the support of our volunteers, as they've assisted with the drives and distributions of books, serving on committees, or directly tutoring our students through programs like Read and Feed or reading with students through Wake Ed Partnerships, Partners Read. And while the support from the community has allowed the coalition's work to expand, we continue to recognize the pronounced need and opportunity to partner with families in deeper, more transformative ways. Our team had an opportunity to engage in some work at the Friday Institute through the Innovation Project and the Early Learning Network. Through our collaboration there with our team, we went through a process using liberatory design thinking to problem solve how we might better connect literacy to our families. Through this work, our team created a prototype. Well, unfortunately, you're not able to view the video clip that we had just shown. I encourage you to take some time to view it when you can, because it really highlights the work of the team, the work that we've done as a part of the Early Learning Network, and how that's brought us to this next piece of the presentation, which we think is really powerful and transformative. With funding from the Kellogg Foundation, we're excited to pilot a family leadership and early literacy liaison position to support building the capacity of families, schools, and community partners in the overall early childhood system for transformative literacy-based family engagement. The vision for the Family Leadership and Early Literacy Liaison is that the position will facilitate ongoing feedback loops between families, the district, and Wake Up and Read to ensure that we can center the voices of all families. The position will help foster trusting, authentic relationships with students, families, and partners in low-wealth communities and communities of color to establish new and strengthen existing partnerships to support literacy development of students in kindergarten through third grade. The hope is this person will be able to connect with children and families around literacy and learning within existing spaces and places in our community, like barbershops, laundromats, parks, churches, and shopping plazas, some of the places where families frequent and feel most comfortable. Not only will this person be out talking with families, but this is truly an opportunity to learn from and with parents and caregivers about their needs when it comes to learning and literacy. Our Family Leadership and Literacy Liaison will organize and facilitate opportunities to learn about the science of reading and learning everywhere practices in non-traditional ways that are creative, culturally responsive, and community-centered. We will be co-creating solutions with families for literacy supports in schools, homes, and community spaces. And ultimately, we hope that this position will lead to more family leadership within the coalition to really allow us to hear directly from families and bring them more closely into the decision-making process. And we are very happy to have that person that's with us today. And if I can, welcome her up to say a word or two. I'd like to welcome Marissa Smith. She'll be leading in this role.
Good afternoon. First, I want to say how grateful I am to be serving in the role of Family Leadership and Literacy Liaison. I wanted to tell you just what brings me here today. Many experiences on the school level with children who were attempting to strive for success, but never quite reaching proficiency. Surely lots of growth and opportunities to succeed as grade level students, but never quite reaching the mark of proficiency. And so with parents unsure of how to help and the lack of resources at home to support, I was elated when I realized this opportunity opened up, because it gave me the chance to work with families to help ensure that we were moving the needle in the right direction. And so, especially for those students of color. So I jumped at the opportunity to partner with families and hear more about their needs and where they are, and to support their growth and learn together how we can create resources and more support so that they can, in turn, be more successful with their preparation for their students and increase their students' literacy development. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. We're so excited to see this program grow and its initiatives to bring books into the hands of our children. Are there questions from my colleagues? Ms. Scott.
Thank you, and it's so nice to meet you. This is such an important part of what we do, getting books into the hands of children. I really appreciate what you said about when parents are uncertain how to help their child, being able to provide those resources and answering the questions that they have. And I did just want to point out, these are amazing things that our county is doing, and we are so fortunate to have amazing partners. But if you'll notice, I don't think anyone from the media is in here right now. Oh, good. Okay, good. That's good. But, I mean, people are, outside. And it's a shame. I hope that this is highlighted in the way that it should be, and that your work continues to be amplified, because it is so critical and it is so important. We do have literacy deserts in parts of our county, and I appreciate the intentional work you do to address those, and creating a love for reading too. I mean, that's something we take with us our entire life. And I had a quick question. Forgive me for not knowing this already, but is deer time something that the state of North Carolina does not really
Drop
promote?
everything and read?
That school by school, they may do something like that. It's not a statewide initiative or a countywide initiative, but the DEAR as in drop everything and read.
Right. That's right. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. But I mean, we certainly have seen when books have been distributed that those students kind of drop everything and read right then and there when they get those books in their hands. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hagerty.
And again, thank you all for coming in your presentation. One thing I would ask, too, is just we hear so many wonderful things about these programs. We talk to volunteers in the community who work so hard on this. We see, we get good feedback from teachers and schools. If you have success stories, feedback from students and how it's impacted their learning, feedback from their teachers that have seen improvements, stories from parents who've seen a difference themselves. If you track any of these kids or see improvements in the classroom, we would love to have the information, and that's information we can use to help sell the benefits of the program. Thank you.
If I can share a very brief piece of feedback. When we moved into the building over on Capitol Boulevard in January of 2020, the very first donation that came in for that year's drive, we had just kicked off our annual drive, and a woman came to the door, and I answered the door, and it was a parent, and she was bringing back books. She had bringing back books that she had received that her children had outgrown. So her children were at two different schools, and she wanted to bring back the books to make sure that they continued forward. And I thought that was just really powerful, not just, I think, in that she was so touched that she brought them, but I think the fact that all parents want to participate. All parents want to support their child's learning, their child's literacy. And sometimes we make some assumptions about how they can do that or what they're capable of doing. And I think when she came back and she shared those books and she shared her experience, to me that really elevated the power of parents. And for us, the opportunity to continue to figure out how we bring them into the coalition in a way that can help us begin to really shift the needle. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you to your coalition partners for recognizing the importance of this. It is no small feat to collect 200,000 books and to see the ways that they're not just coming to our schools, but going to places where children are. I love the barbershop program and seeing what can be done unexpectedly outside of school and the power of reading. So anyone listening that wants to get involved, It is wakeupandread.org, where you can find more information. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That is the end of our work session. I believe we will be pausing to get ready for our 5:30 regular meeting. Thank you.